All right. Welcome, everyone. We're a little past the top of the hour, but I think we can get started.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for participating in our final virtual presentation of the Pioneer Valley Safe Streets Project. My name is Gary Rue. I'm the Director of Transportation Planning here at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. We have representatives from PVPC here in attendance. We also have representatives from our consultant team. We're going to do some introductions of those team moving forward, but today we're giving you an overview of the project, giving you a sense of the work that's been undertaken, some of the preliminary results, and then we'll give you an overview of what the next steps will be and how you'll be able to give us feedback on the work that's been done to date. Can we go to the next slide, please? Here is our project team, Carl Jackson, as well as Jeff McCullough. And although she's not online, Kiati Parmar have been the associates here at PVPC that have been working on this project. And then Tony and Kayla, can you please introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Kayla Northup. I'm a project manager and the project manager of this project, and I work at VHB.
Thanks, Kayla. Tony Marie Pignatelli. I'm the engagement lead on this project. I'm responsible for engagement activities for IMEG and on this project.
Great, thank you both. And you'll be hearing from both of those as we advance through this presentation. Can we go to the next slide? So just as an overview, and we do get rid of the housekeeping, this meeting is being recorded and closed captioning is available. All participants will be muted during the presentation. However, later on during the discussion, use the chat tool or raise your hand to make a comment. We have the phone protocol for this meeting. We're also asking you to please close all your apps and programs to limit your streamings or download. That'll help with the way the presentation functions. If you need any help with this Zoom platform, please send a chat to the host, or we have an email for Cassandra Valancourt from IMEG, and she can help you as well. Next slide. So we'll jump right into the project overview. Just a brief background on the PVPC. We are the MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, for 43 cities and towns. We're responsible for transportation planning activities, closely aligned with the distribution of federal and state transportation funds. This also includes engagement and coordination with our member communities. We do a lot of transportation data collection and analysis. Essentially anything that is federally or state funded in the transportation realm, we are usually likely to have a role in that. Next slide. The project that we are working on, the Safer Streets and Roads for All, or SS4A for short, is a federally funded transportation grant program. And this was a competitive process that was available not only for regional planning agencies, but also for local governments. And there were really several different ways to go about requesting this funding. Typically, the first step was to request planning money for the purpose of developing a regional safety action plan, and that's what we did as part of the application for the Pioneer Valley region. But once you have that accepted regional safety action plan, there is also money for implementation projects to physically make the improvements that would be necessary to advance safety in the region. There's also a demonstration piece that is available for funding, and we in fact did receive some demonstration money as part of this grant, but largely today we're going to focus on that regional safety action plan element. In our next slide. PVPC study area is 43 cities and towns, with the big caveat here, 5 communities, Chicopee, Holyoke, Springfield, Ware, and Westfield, receive separate money under this program. So what you'll see is for most of this regional safety action plan, they're not included in this analysis. There is a coordination effort with those 5 communities to make sure that, one, we're not overlapping and doing repetitive work, but also to make sure that we're identifying opportunities where we can collaborate in the future. You'll hear more that we did receive some comments in those 5 areas as part of this effort, which we did attempt to pass along. Really, the whole study area is identified as these what now results in less than the we have 43 minus 5 communities, so 38 communities that we're working in to do this. It's limited to our publicly municipally funded and maintained roadways, or actually anything except the interstate roadways, limited access roadways. Our focus is primarily on fatal and serious injury crashes, the higher profile crashes, and the data set that we used for analysis years was 2020 through 2024. Kayla's going to make that much more clear when she gets into this. And we're identified a series of project goals as part of this analysis, a comprehensive crash analysis throughout the region, but then systematic assessments of our existing transportation infrastructure. There was a large engagement effort of stakeholders, residents, businesses, and community leadership, and then developing the evidence-based recommendations to prioritize safety for all modes of transportation, not just automobiles, but all users of the transportation system. And also a lot of research on the appropriate countermeasures that could be used in most of our region to begin to identify ways to address safety and improve safety. And finally, the plan lays out the roadmap for the implementation of the recommendations. We are well into our project timeline. We began this work really in the fall of last year, really got into the public component in December of last year. And this slide is walking you through the various stages of how we got here today. And the goal is really to release this draft safety action plan at the MPO meeting we have scheduled for June 23rd, and allow a significant opportunity for comment and feedback on that draft plan, with a goal to finalize when the MPO is in agreement that it makes sense to take that final plan. And then that final plan will actually be submitted to Federal Highway for their review. And once they've accepted the document, we can officially end that safety action plan development process. Next slide. And we're on to community engagement. I'm going to turn this over to Tony.
Thank you, Gary. So public and stakeholder engagement activities generated broad regional participation and identified key transportation safety concerns across the Pioneer Valley. I'm going to dive into some of the specifics here. The safety action plan is grounded in community input. We engaged residents, municipal staff, advocates, regional partners, community organizations throughout the project study. Outreach included development of a project website, which is the landing page for individuals to get information about the project, track when meetings were happening, events were happening, and access project materials. There were also a number of public meetings. This is one of them, the third of 3 public meetings. Pop-up events, an online mapping tool was generated, and we held stakeholder and committee meetings. And shown here is the reach of those activities. I'll just read a couple. But we had 368 interactions with members of the public at pop-up events, where we were going out into the community, meeting people where they were, as opposed to expecting them to come to us during meetings. And so that was a very, very effective tactic to hear from folks throughout the region. We also received 550 comments on the digital mapping tool, which was fantastic. It gave us a real sense of where some of the challenges were, and also where the infrastructure is working well. So that was another tool that we used. And then through stakeholder coordination sessions, we met with 15 different organizations. So you can take a look at the stats there. But ultimately, the takeaway is that the plan itself is really grounded in hearing from the people of the Pioneer Valley. So we engaged with a number of individuals at pop-up events, and we asked them, what is your primary mode of transportation? And respondents reported using a variety of transportation methods, walking, biking, transit. And while driving remains the most common travel mode, many residents also like to walk and bike. And creating a safer transportation network really means designing roads that work for everyone, regardless of how they travel. And we're seeing that, in fact, people choose many different modes. And so these findings really reinforce the need for a multimodal approach to safety improvements. So as we reviewed comments from the surveys, the public meetings, pop-up events, the mapping tool, several consistent themes emerged across the region. So the transportation system is perceived as car-oriented. Participants frequently noted that road design often prioritizes vehicles, over the movement of people that are walking, biking, using buses, or a train. Many residents expressed interest in creating a more balanced transportation network. So we heard that loud and clear at all of our engagements. I'd mentioned on the earlier slide, people use many different modes of travel. Connectivity remains a challenge. Participants identified gaps between destinations, trails, sidewalks, transit stops, and neighborhoods. They like to have, rectified or connected so they can move more freely. Even where facilities exist, some of these missing links can definitely create safety concerns or even discourage, movement through walking, biking. Driver behavior is a major safety concern. So there's speeding, red light failures, distracted driving. These were, most frequently cited issues when it comes to driver behavior. And then there was a recognition that community input really strengthens the data. So we're not only looking at community input, we're using it to validate what we're seeing in the crash analysis. And then also highlight some of those local issues that might not show up in the crash data, which Kayla's going to talk to us about in a moment. So together, these themes help to shape the priorities and countermeasures and the implementation strategies that are included in the regional safety action plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kayla.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony. So really wanted to touch on the safety analysis. I mean, this is a big component of this plan, and it really helps us take, as Tony mentioned, validate what we're hearing from the communities. So taking that information and looking at how it aligns with what we're seeing in the data, since this report is a data-driven based document, and also, that then feeds into how how the outcomes of this plan are. So next slide, please. So in total, we looked at crashes, as Gary mentioned, from 2020 to 2024. So this is the total crashes. So all types of injuries, severities in the region. So overall, 2020 was kind of an odd year, not as many cars traveling due to the pandemic. But then, we're kind of consistently seeing like around that 1,000 to 1,200 mark. And then we really start to whittle it down. For this grant, we look at fatal and serious injury crashes, since those are the most severe or life-altering. And we looked at it for the region, and you can see that over on the right side of the screen here. So there are not really a steady downtrend overall, but we hope to make progress with that as part of this plan and have an investment towards safety. Next slide, please. So from that crash data review, we take two approaches to doing the safety analysis. We look at a high injury network, which is a crash data-based approach, and that identifies segments of roadway or intersections with the highest concentration of fatal or serious crashes. And this is based on past crash data. So this is more of a reactive approach, looking where crashes are happening and addressing those locations. That gets us to, half of the battle. So we're addressing things that are already happening, but how can we prevent those crashes from happening going forward? So that's where the high risk network comes in. We take a risk-based approach, which focuses on segments of road and intersections that have the highest potential for crashes. So we take the roadway characteristics where there's observed and occurring crashes and take those contributing factors. So think roadway features, think the number of lanes, volume, speed, roadway curvature, intersection geometry. Take all those roadway features, and those can be contributing risk factors for the crash. So we can actually identify the types of segments and intersections where these crashes are taking place and kind of screen the whole region for areas that are similar and have those similar roadway features. So there's potential for a crash to happen. If it's happened in one place, it could happen in another under the same roadway conditions. So this is a more proactive approach to safety. Conducting both of these analysis allows us not to only address where crashes are happening, but hopefully prevent them from happening in the future. So we can take both of these approaches to create a comprehensive plan for the region. Next slide, please. So I want to just delve in quickly to the results of the analysis. So as was mentioned, we did not look at limited access highways. So any like major route where it's not an arterial, so any kind of freeway, expressway, interstate. So those were not included, and also the five municipalities that are conducting their own plans. So we've identified the top fifth and 10th percentile for crashes. And as you can see, it's very heavily concentrated on kind of those more, urban, suburban areas and not as much out in kind of the western side of the region. Mostly because of exposure. There's not really a ton of exposure for these crashes to happen. They do happen, but this is based on, the highest percentage of them happening. But that's where the high risk network comes in. So Tony, if you could jump to that. So looking at the high risk network, we can look at across the whole region, where there's potential for crashes to happen at intersections. So you can see this is a much better spread of across the region of looking at potential project locations. This is where this feeds from. Our projects and our outcomes of this are looking at all of these and identifying the top priority locations for both crashes and risk. Next slide, please. And then we delve in a little bit further. So that was just intersections. Now we're really looking at another focus area of lane departure. So leaving the travel lane and then also speeding. Speeding was a universal concern that we heard at many of the public meetings and a lot of the outreach we conducted. And it's not just in Massachusetts, it is everywhere. So looking at where there's potential for speeding, and then also that kind of goes hand in hand with lane departure, especially in some of those more rural communities where there isn't a lot of traffic and people can kind of go as fast as they possibly could, give based on the roadway conditions. Um, so vulnerable users, we get into the vulnerable users. So that includes ped, bike, and then other users that could be scooters, skateboards, e-assist, so other like non-motorized. And vulnerable road users are disproportionately at higher risk for fatal and serious injury. They're more vulnerable. So making them a priority in the roadway network is very important, especially given what we've heard in a lot of the outreach that Tony mentioned. So we've also evaluated the potential risk for pedestrians and bicyclists in the region. So you can see there is a lot. It does really highlight, especially for bicyclists in those more urban areas, but there still is a lot of potential, where there's an adjacent trail or there's some, it's much more of like a leisurely, biking corridor in some of these more rural communities. So we've also looked at that. Next slide, please. So once we've conducted the analysis, we start to look at the project outcomes. From there, we are able to take this information and identify locations that fell on both the high injury and the high risk networks, and prioritize those. There's also a additional methodology that goes into identifying a prioritization of that. And so I'll get into that next. So one other kind of outcome, first and foremost, many of you probably heard if you've been to other meetings, I did the Pioneer Valley MPO's Vision Zero statement towards conducting a safety analysis for setting a goal of trying to reduce fatal and serious injuries to zero by 2050. And that updated statements on their website. So getting into the methodology I mentioned, we looked at determining the methodology for screening and weighting the intersections and segments from our safety analysis. From there, we assign a point system to all these different screening elements in order to create a score from 0 to 100 for each segment and intersection. From there, we were able to identify, take the ones that had the highest score. So the ones that scored the highest were the highest priority. From there, we determined what the threshold was, what was like an achievable goal, what was implementable for both the region and then as well as each municipality. We wanted every municipality to have projects and goals to work off of because with this grant and this plan, municipalities can do a joint application. It doesn't just need to be PVPC going after the grant. It can be, a town or a group of town partnering together to look at demonstration or implementation. So we wanted every town to have the opportunity to kind of look at what works best for them, but also have the region look at goals that they can work towards as well. So we've identified projects, and Tony switched over perfect timing to look at the methodology for our scoring. So we break it up into a few different areas. So for intersections, it's very well distributed between the high injury and high risk network. Also looking at disadvantaged communities or like doing an equity review on areas that have limited transportation access but they have need, but also then looking at population and weighting that as part of this analysis. For segments, we get into a little more granular because it's based on there's a lot more risk networks that go into this. So we break it down. So every risk network gets a score, total score. So we were able to break this down, and both are out of 100 points. So if you can jump to the next slide, Tony. So for regional projects, it's very well kind of like centrally located. It kind of like sprinkles out, but it's really along that like north-south plane there. And we identified kind of the minimum score as like the first tier of projects to be a score of 75 points or greater. And the great thing about this plan is it gives you prioritizes every location, but we've been able to break it down into separate tiers so that way, as other projects come through, we can incorporate that in. And then from a municipal standpoint, we identified at least 5 projects for every town, and that allows each municipality to review the location and the recommended countermeasures for future implementation, where they could go after the demonstration or implementation funding. Next slide, please. And from that, we were able to review each of the priority locations and identify recommendations. So there are 2 different things that we've done. We've provided a countermeasure toolbox, which gives it just says what it is. It gives you ideas on what could be done for different things. So improving pedestrian safety, there's a various different options, and it allows the towns and cities flexibility in what works best for them and what's going to be easy for them to maintain long term or what they could kind of incorporate into their day to day just to improve safety from that. But then also look at some big picture. So we wanted some things that were implementable in the immediate term to really start to move the needle in safety, but then also looking ahead on what we could do in a bigger picture for a larger project. But then we've whittled it down to looking at those site-specific priority locations and identified specific infrastructure improvements and ideas that could be considered for each of these locations. And then also looking at enforcement, education, and policy, because as much as we want to improve infrastructure, it only gets us so far if the other ones don't follow suit. And we need the enforcement, the education, and then the, aggressive policy making to really move the needle in safety. So as I mentioned, the safety countermeasure toolbox, it has several actions and strategies. So there's engineering and non-engineering, and they're broken out between short, medium, and long-term countermeasures. We really wanted to focus on implementable solutions. We also identified responsible leads by countermeasures, so that way it was very clear on, who the coordination could be worked out between, whether it was the town, if MassDOT needed to be involved as well. And we wanted to make sure we included solutions for both engineering and non-engineering. So a lot of the rural communities don't have their own, it's a lot of volunteer EMS, or there's not a full police department. So making sure there was recommendations in order to improve post-crash care and enforcement, with that, as well as, the traditional infrastructure and engineering solutions. Next slide, please. And these are just, I wanted to highlight some of the countermeasures. So really starting off with a lot of the, maintenance, bringing things up to standard, um, things that are low cost, high benefit, high visibility crosswalk marking, signage, um, doing some, bump outs could be a more longer term solution, but there's options where we can look at doing them in the short term as like a pop-up demonstration and trying it out, in the short term. So we want to give as many ideas as possible. No ideas are bad ideas, and have a wide breadth of information for all the communities to, work towards, so we can work towards achieving that goal of zero fatalities. Um, so what does the Regional Safety Action Plan include? Really everything we just talked about today. And with a little bit more, we've talked about the safety analysis, the engagement, but it's also looking at a lot of the existing regional, statewide, town plans and policies, and looking at where there's potential, improvement that could be done with that, and just plan alignment on how this plan can align with other plans that are also being prepared by Pioneer Valley, by MassDOT. Um, the safety needs assessment and the safety compass dashboard. So you'll see I think it's actually officially uploaded as of yesterday. The safety compass is online, an updated one for the same study years. So every town has their own sheets. So you can look at where the crash data specifically for your town. And then there's a dashboard, that goes with it that I think, Kiati was kind of trying to get online too. Um, and from there, we're really looking at the implementation strategies, looking at funding opportunities at both the federal and, the state level, or even, public-private partnerships. So really trying to give as many opportunities for implementation as possible so we can start to move the needle on reduction in crashes. And then how can these communities use the plan? I think we've touched on this a little bit already. So prioritizing the safety improvements at those high risk locations, looking to advance projects and incorporate recommendations from this plan into any local work that's being done, pursuing additional funding, um, and then really partnering with Pioneer Valley and MassDOT to implement some of these solutions, taking into account of, looking at what's already in, the transportation improvement plan, looking at where we can maybe, bundle some of these improvements in as you review them if MassDOT's coming through with another project. But then also tracking progress and updating priorities over time. How have the investments from this plan and future implementation moved the needle? And how has, safety priorities changed, based on all the work that you all are doing in your communities? And then how do you contribute? Being here today is a great start. But as Gary mentioned, the plan will be rolling out hopefully next week, if approved by the MPO. And, there'll be a public comment period. So we'd love to have some comments on that if you have any, and take some time to review it. And just continuing to partner and participate in local planning and public meetings as projects move forward. Um, and looking to engage those in the community to practice, safe travel behaviors. Um, I think that's the biggest thing, if we all work together, that's the start of moving the needle on this. And project next steps. I mentioned hopefully next week on the 23rd, we'll get the MPO to release the draft plan. Following that, we will, review all public comments and address them accordingly and finalize the plan for USDOT review. And then following that, Gary had mentioned there's a demonstration project that goes along with this. So we will be starting that. We've actually already started a little bit of the data end of things on our end before we really start getting going. So that'll be an exciting, kind of next step over the next year. So there'll be some coordination, I think, with some of the communities throughout that process as well as we move forward. And I think that's it for me. So happy to take any questions if anyone has any. No questions?
So at this point, members of the public have been muted. So if you'd like to participate, we'd encourage you to just use the chat feature on or the raised hand feature on the bottom of the screen. So if you click on that, we'll know that you have comment, question, something to contribute, and we'll be happy to take you off mute so you can join the conversation.
I think just to add a little bit of detail to the regional safety compass, this document is something that we have. I believe this is our third or fourth iteration of the safety compass that has been developed. But this is where every community's crash experience has been documented in terms of what are the main safety concerns from a municipal standpoint. And the dashboard is not yet live, but what we'll be doing is using our pvpc.org website to get that published. And once we do, we'll be making the public aware that we have this tool. The dashboard allows you to do more specific analysis based on the data that has been uploaded for a specific community. And it's quite a powerful tool.
And for those who may not be comfortable coming off mute, feel free to drop a comment question in the chat. We'll give it, I don't know, another minute or so, Gary, and then can wrap it
Yeah,
up.
or after the fact, oh, so we do have a comment about the demonstration project. I think you should take that, Leah. I can start, and Kayla, maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can chime in. So
Certainly.
so our demonstration project is for a analysis of all of the traffic signals that do not currently comply with the manual on uniform traffic control devices. And I think Federal Highway described this really well when we were discussing this project with them. Is basically we've made a hypothesis that crashes occur at a higher rate at an older traffic signal, something that's not as up to date and doesn't comply with the standards that you would put in place if you were to design that signal today. And the analysis will focus on the signals, number one, that are out of compliance and why they're out of compliance, and look at the existing safety data to see if, in fact, yes, there is a higher rate of crashes when compared to a location that is in better compliance with the MUTCD. The if I'm being honest, this was also a way to bring the five communities that have separate grant money for their own safety action plans into a regional type of a project. And we are aware that we have a large number of older signals in our region. And we thought it was important to identify where those are and perhaps begin a process to prioritize how they could be considered for future enhancement. I don't know if I said everything, Kayla, but
Yeah, I think you covered most of it.
all right.
From like a, you know, review and, we're going to try, we've already have the crash data, so that's a great first step from the plan. And really looking at key areas for MUTCD compliance from a desktop review. What can we do from a desktop and create a GIS based tool for Pioneer Valley to, be able to track these assets with the community and the communities as well to identify these assets. And have it all in a nice dashboard where we can then kind of calculate these crash rates and see what compliance is. There will be some field work components. You may see some of our signals team out in the fields in the coming months, in some of the signal cabinets or in the fields, doing some field inspections. So don't be surprised if you see some folks in the cabinets.
Thank you. And I am able to unmute, so thank you.
Oh, perfect.
One quick follow-up. Is that going to be publicly available, that the data once the demonstration project is done?
Absolutely. It because it's federally funded, that will have to have a public facing component. What that will look like remains to be seen.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. This is interesting.
Yep. Thank you.
Great. I'm looking out for raised hands, not seeing any at this point. I'm also not seeing any comments, any additional comments in the chat. If you do have a question, comment, thought that you want to share, please raise your hand using the feature within Zoom, or drop something in the chat, or you can take Gary up on his offer to reach out and continue the conversation after this meeting.
So if you go to the PioneerValleySafeStreets.com website, my contact information is available on the website. Feel free to reach out to me, and we will do our best to address your question or comment.
All right. Thank you all for joining today. Gary, are we ready to
I think so.
people and wrap up? All right. Thank you all for joining. We greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to any comments that you provide on the plan.
Yep. Thank you all so much.